Welcome, Lauriane. Today we talk about your new publication, which is about practices in outreach to the NewSpace sector. And to start with, can you tell us what is the NewSpace sector and why is it actually relevant to prevent missile proliferation?
Yes, of course. So when we refer to NewSpace, we usually mean the increasing commercialization of the sector, but also the rise of a number of innovative approaches, different business practices, and a new funding model as well. And it's particularly relevant for the missile non-proliferation regime because a lot of the technologies that are being developed within NewSpace are essentially dual-use technologies, so they can also be used for missiles. Some of them are already controlled within the framework of the Missile Technology Control Regime, the MTCR. And it's also relevant because of the sheer number of new commercial actors, for instance, a lot of new startups that are coming in that can have a lower level of awareness about export controls and some gaps still in their compliance systems.
And when you talk about outreach, what particular outreach do you have in mind, and especially in the context of export control?
So when we refer to outreach, we mean the kind of range of activities that states conduct to raise awareness towards industry and to foster a dialogue with them on export controls, really. And outreach by states authorities, including by the national export licensing authorities, is really a key component of national export control systems. This is because industry really is at the forefront of efforts to prevent proliferation of missile relevant technology. One thing important to mention perhaps here is that for outreach to be as effective and beneficial as possible, it's really important that it goes both ways, so that industry and states can share mutual feedback.
From the timing, why is now such an important moment to have this interaction and this mutual outreach going?
So essentially because the sector is very rapidly growing at the moment. It's still nascent in a number of countries, but it means it's a very good time to set up these awareness raising and outreach procedures so that newcomers can be guided and that yes, states can facilitate the process of companies adopting compliance systems and being aware of export controls.
And looking at your findings, sort of which good practices did you identify and which also particularly apply in this NewSpace context?
So before I go into them in a bit more detail, I think it's important to highlight that these good practices will vary really depending on states and the composition of their national NewSpace industry. But there are some general good practices that we can highlight. So national authorities can, for instance, organize dedicated events with the stakeholders that they want to focus on. They can also participate in industry events, in trade fairs, or, for instance, publish guidance materials to share with them. One thing also is to make sure to coordinate with nationals' space industry associations, which usually have a good idea of challenges in the sector and of the actors in NewSpace, really. But then there's, in addition, several good practices that apply in particular to this NewSpace sector. One key thing is for states to really identify and map the sector, so who's really part of it. Also to make sure to include and communicate the benefits for companies to take part in outreach, so to make sure that they come forward. It's also particularly important to sensitize startups, which can have lower resources and kind of ability to implement those controls, and also to focus on space launch vehicle manufacturers because of the technology that they develop that carries particular risk for proliferation.
No, and like you mentioned, there's a lot of new actors, there's a lot of happening right now, where, like, also building on the findings of your report, where can states share experience and the good practices internationally right now, would you say?
So a first forum would be the Missile Technology Control Regime, DMTCR, where states can continue to exchange on good practices, and they can then develop and publish a good practice guide specifically targeted at NewSpace companies, for instance. Mm-hmm. Another forum is within the framework of the UN Security Council Resolution 1540. The Wiesbaden process was established. This process is a forum that is particularly focused on strengthening outreach to industry on export control matters. So that's a very relevant forum that can also be used. To conclude, I think these exchanges can be very beneficial for states to be able to refine good practices and also to discuss any challenges that they might face in the process as they become more and more experienced with this tool of targeted outreach.
Thank you really, Lauriane, for sharing this really interesting new development with us.